Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim. We talk about horror films on this show, and on this episode, on this Octoberthon episode, it's October, we were working our way through all three Re-Animator films. This is the third and final film. Well, for now, who knows? Never say never. But this is Beyond Re-Animator, so we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We will warn you in the middle before we get to spoilers. This was a first time watch for me. For you, not so much.
Second time. I'd seen it before a couple of years ago,
Cool.
but I really didn't remember much other than like kind of the general plot.
Yeah. So Beyond Re-Animator is an interesting one because it's kind of one of these examples of a sequel that came much later. Because the first one was 85, second was 89, both in the 80s.
I was shocked when like I went up and checked out what year it came out because I was thinking like, oh, like the first two seem very set in the 80s, and I was like, this one feels like a very 90s-esque movie. And then when I looked at it, I was like, holy shit, 2003.
Which I mean, it's just, I feel old saying this, but that's 15 years ago now, so it's not even that recent. But
Yeah.
it's obviously much more recent than the 80s. And obviously Jeffrey Combs is looking a bit older, and he's more middle aged now, and that's fine. But it's funny because it's like, this is of a different era. Like, I mean, hell, the female lead in this, let me just remind myself of her name, Elsa Pataky, I think you say her name. That's Chris Hemsworth's wife. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So feels really. She I think more recently she's been in like the Fast and the Furious movies and stuff like that. She's been in the last few of those. I mean, I didn't necessarily recognize her. I was just looking at the various cast members, and that stuck out as she has like 3 kids with. I was like, what? Okay, random Hemsworth wife. That's fine.
The role of a lifetime.
It was just funny because I think about it. No one knew who Chris Hemsworth was for another 7 years, 8 years after this.
Excuse you, I did.
Oh, did you? You in 2003? You knew who Chris Hemsworth was? All right, sure. I'll buy that.
Yeah, check out my my old Angel Fire page. As a big Hemsworth fan site.
See, now you've mentioned Angel Fire, I know what it is. But if you tried to like get that phrase out of me, I would never have thought of it before.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I might have mentioned this before, or just talked to people about it before, but I kind of miss fan sites. Like I don't know if you remember doing this, but in the early days of the internet, if I typed in like Spider-Man, like there'd be all these Spider-Man websites you can go, and it would just be some guy being like, hey, here's my comic collection, I love Spider-Man, here's like character bios and stuff. And I used to love that shit, but like now if you do it, all you're gonna get is like, new updates about the latest Marvel movie, or oh hey, like,
I mean, I feel like
it's kind of sucks.
The character bio stuff though, I mean, the wikis have kind of like taken over that, and it's much more easier to use and more comprehensive. So I mean, I'm quite happy with that change.
Oh sure, but yeah, there's I don't know, but everything's like so like uniform and stuff on there. I kind of miss like the little personal touch of just like, oh, here's like some dude that just dedicated their life to, I don't know, Buffy or something. Who knows? But
you remember chat rooms? Remember when that was like a thing?
Oh yeah, it was a big thing. You hear the little door opens when someone comes in and it leaves, that closes.
I'm not talking about instant messages. I'm talking about chat rooms on websites for things. I remember on the Buffy chat room.
Yeah.
Back in like 2001 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Dear.
It'd be interesting if they if someone ever does a movie that's like, specifically set in like something like, 1998, and then they kind of, show people like on those kind of websites and like have those like authentic like graphics and sound effects like that. That'd be interesting.
Yes, people were obsessed with sound effects on websites back then, and we all hate them with a passion. I'm pretty sure we hated them back then as well. It's not. It always felt tacky, but people just did it for whatever reason. But yeah, so Beyond Re-Animator is much later, and the premise is that Herbert West, we see like a flashback at this. Well, it's a flashback in the context of this movie, but it's actually set right after the last film, and we see him being arrested for all the stuff that happens in Bride the Re-Animator, and he spent the last 15 years, or has it been 14 years actually between films. I think at one point he says like 10 years in the movie, so I don't think it's meant to be real time exactly, but He spent that time in prison, and the movie's set in the prison. Uh, and a kid whose big sister gets eaten by a reanimated corpse from one of his experiments because they live near the cemetery. That little kid grows up to be a med student, and he wants to do his residency at the hospital, the doctor's office in the prison. So he comes because he's obsessed with West, and he wants to like try and help him and continue experiments. And one of my favorite little touches about the movie actually is West has clearly had very little contact with any scientific equipment. He's not been allowed to do anything for the past like 10, 15 years. And Howard, the doctor, just pulls out his green syringe that he's had on him since he picked it up that night, and just the little strings of the music, dun, 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 just come in as soon as he sees it. And I was like, okay, right, he's back in the game. And of course,
apparently no shelf life on that serum.
well, he debates that it might have like deteriorated. He's like, oh, well, maybe this won't have aged well, maybe this won't work well, but it works. It's fine. I'm surprised it kept that bright green glow for the past decade.
Yeah.
That's the most impressive thing to me. But of course, they team up to try and do some experiments. There's a dead inmate at one point, and of course they reanimate him because that's what happens. And we have the delightful warden and so on. And of course we have the reporter, the aforementioned Hemsworth wife, which is what I'm going to refer to her from. Her name's Laura. And she's there doing like a prison profile thing on the warden, and meets our Dr. Howard, and they kind of form a bond, and that's all nice and lovely. But that's the movie. So, Tim, do you enjoy? Do you like Beyond Re-Animator?
I would say I mildly like it. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I like about it, and there's ideas in there that I like, but you can also tell, like, it feels like a little cheaper. Some of the actors are not the best, so there is kind of a
Howard's not very good. Honestly, I thought Hemsworth's wife was pretty terrible. Although, to be fair to her, there's two things that I think are adding to her pretty bad performance in this. One is that English is not her first language, and I feel like this might have been like one of her first roles speaking in English. And two, she's clearly been dubbed the entire it's her voice, I think, but the entire thing is dubbed. That you can tell it's ADR'd, and her mouth doesn't quite match her dialogue all the time, and it's really obvious.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure exactly how this came about, but we might see more of this if we do more Yuzna movies from around this time period. But he had like a weird deal with Spain or something, that he shot like a couple of movies there. I want to say maybe like early 2000s, late 90s or something.
I'm not surprised to hear you say this, because a lot of the prisoners also had accents, and I was starting to think it was a bit weird that so many people in this American prison had these thick accents.
That's one of the things, like, it could potentially be charming if you maybe had a reason for it, but the fact that they're sticking with, like, oh no, this is still Arkham, Massachusetts, like, it kind of makes it seem like, no, it's not. This is very clearly Europe. Like, even like I felt like the police cars and stuff, kind of looked European. And so many people either have accents or are dubbed over that, it's not like there's anything wrong with that, but it feels kind of disingenuous to what they're trying to portray, which is like this New England, kind of like feel.
Yeah.
But it's weird. Like, if we do Dagon, which is another movie I'd like to do at some point. I think that was like a similar deal or whatever.
Yeah, because with Elsa, Hemsworth's wife, because she was really distracting. As soon as she started speaking, it felt really off. And when I was looking through the actors, I clicked on her, and when I found out it was Hemsworth, I didn't recognize her. I was surprised to see she was still like an actor, and I was like, is she like an? And she's been like Fast and the Furious movies and stuff. It's not like she's like went nowhere. And I'm like, I don't remember like sticking out in those movies as being bad. I think it is just the dubbing. Maybe this was one of the first times she ever had to act in English. I don't know, but it's really jarring of a performance.
Yeah. It's definitely distracting.
And then Dr. Howard's not much better, and he doesn't even have the English isn't his first language is an excuse. He's just bad.
Unfortunately, he's not very good. Did you did you get the reference to his name?
Howard Phillips. I don't think I do now.
So, well, Re-Animator is based on an H.P. Lovecraft
Yes. Oh,
story.
HP. Yeah. Okay.
And,
All right.
yeah,
Is that what
so
HP
that's
stands
yeah.
for? Okay,
Yep.
there you go.
Mhm.
I learned something today. I
Yeah.
learned something. So I think it's an okay movie. Like, there's definitely things I like about it. There's some
Yeah.
nice outrageous moments that I appreciate. I think the biggest problem with it, outside of some of its low budget constraints, because I think some of the gore and the over the top effects are actually really good. There's a couple of really nice effects. There's actually one that
I,
I was surprised looked as good as it did. I expected, because once it started happening, I was like, this should look terrible in this movie, but it actually looks quite good. So
yeah.
the the,
Well,
the practical makeup effects
oh,
are pretty good.
yeah, I would actually say the opening, like the little kids, I thought were kind of
Oh sure, yeah.
atrocious actors. But when the corpse starts walking through and it's like missing all its lower
Hmm.
jaw and the tongue's wagging and it's like trying to drink the milk and stuff, I thought that looked
Yeah, it looks great.
fantastic. And that kind of
Uh,
yeah, and it kind of pumps you up because you're like, oh man, if this looks that good, the rest of the
and
movie
yeah,
must be
there's a lot of good
fantastic.
moments akin to that. That's one of the best. Admittedly, it starts off high, and
Yeah.
but there's a few really notable effects throughout that are really really good. So I can't fault those. I think the biggest problem though overall is that it feels a little too formulaic in how it's mimicking the first movie. Um, the warden
Yeah.
character, this sleazy guy who clearly wants to, bang the reporter, Emily, or not Laura, sorry, Emily's the big sister.
That actress.
Yeah.
Oh, big
Uh,
sister.
Now Laura, like, right from the get go, he's making all these sleazy eyes at her, and it's just like Doctor What's His Face from the first two movies. There you go,
Dr.
Doctor
Hill,
Hill.
I believe.
It's just like
Yeah.
him. He's in a position of power. It's instead of the hospital, it's a prison. Um, West has got a new partner who's kind of naive, but he's falling for the girl. Almost, I mean, the movie's like so meta at one point. It almost points this out where West looks at her and goes,
Yeah.
"Don't trust her. She's trouble." And they've barely even
Yeah.
met each other. That said, though, to West's credit, the first time that Howard and Laura meet in the electrocution chamber, he comes in and he's just arriving for the first time at the prison, and he comes in to say hi to the warden. And as soon as they see each other, they start talking to each other as if they're like giddy school kids, where they're like embarrassed. It's like, "Oh, you're
Yeah.
pretty. Oh, hey,
Yeah.
I'll just say
Oh
hi,
yeah,
hi."
yeah.
And they're like, "Where did you two?"
Yeah. And it did kind of remind me of yeah, like Bride of Re-Animator, where at least in the first Re-Animator, there was an established relationship between who was it, Dean and Meg,
Dan
uh
and Meg.
like Dan, sorry, yeah, Dan and Meg, like they had been going out like for a while, or yeah, at least like knew each other and that kind of thing. But then like this reminded me more of Bride, where yeah, he just meets that like Italian student or whatever, and they just are instantly like in love.
Yeah. Um. So I mean that was the thing. I think that's what also a big problem in the movie is that they have like two encounters like romantically. Like they have like the he drives her home that first day. They end up having sex and they have like another romantic moment. And then it sets up that she's actually investigating West and she's like been reporting on it and she's looking at it. And it never really comes up because the plot just goes in a direction where it doesn't really matter that much. But
Yeah,
they have like two encounters, and then when stuff starts going down, like the way he cares about her, like it does feel like they're supposed to have been together for years. Like the way he's like in
yeah,
love with her, and he's like, "Oh no, I need to save her, and I need to rescue her, and whatever." Like it's all very, I don't know, hard to swallow, I guess is what I'm
yeah.
saying. Um, but
Uh, yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying, and it's a little bit of a shame because I think, like the first two movies, they all felt like pretty similar. Like they're just following like these kind of very specific beats, and this one does the same thing with some like new stuff added in. But like I I feel like they could have done so much more with it because I love the idea of like a prison setting, and I love Wes being in here, and like in general, I like prison stories. I always think they're pretty interesting, and just seeing the way people are able to, um, like make do with so little and stuff, and then having Weston here, and like I think that could have been a lot more interesting. But like you said, they kind of just fall into the same beats
yeah, I mean
as they usually do, which is
speaking
a
of things
shame.
that felt like they were rushed and there wasn't like a lot of progression on, like So they set up shop, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to have you're understaffed at the prison, so how about we get this Herbert West inmate to help me as the doctor? Because he's got a he's a doctor himself. He's got degrees, PhDs, whatever, and everyone's like fine with it. And then like West is like, okay, you're going to help me with my research, good. And he actually, I like that he mentions that Dan like turned in evidence against him, so you know that Dan's living happily ever after somewhere with his Italian
I think he
girlfriend.
says like, yeah, I think he said like my last partner turned state evidence
Yeah.
against me, which I just thought
Yeah,
was
for
funny.
immunity, no doubt, I assume.
Yeah.
But so he's like, "Oh, we need a lab that's like away from prying eyes." And there's this like back room next to the doctor's office, and he's like, "Okay, we're gonna set a lab up in here." I'm like, "Okay, cool, right? They've got a secret lab now." I feel like you never really see them do much in the secret lab beyond the one or two main things. Like there's because I feel like in the second movie you got this sense that they've been doing things for a while, and it's an ongoing
Mhm.
thing. Here, I feel like it's set up, and then there's like two scenes in it, and then that's the third act, and then everything's going down. Like it never actually felt like they were working together for a long time. It felt like it was only
Yeah.
just starting before shit went bad, which maybe is the point. Maybe that's the point, is that when you mess with
Yeah.
this stuff, it just goes down the drain really, really quickly. But
Yeah, I mean, like the whole course of the movie, it feels like, it maybe takes like place over like a couple of days or something. Like, yeah, it really doesn't feel like, much as
yeah,
happens.
so yeah, so I think it's funny though, because I feel like I was a bit more lukewarm in the second one than you were, and I feel like for me this is probably slightly better than the second one.
Uh, I mean, maybe in terms of like maybe plot and like ideas
I
and
think the big thing
stuff.
for me is the pacing. I felt like the second one meandered quite a bit, and felt like it was going in circles a lot of time.
Sure.
Um,
That's
Whereas
fair.
this one, I at least felt like they set up the characters. It was going forward. It felt like it was, I don't know, like the whole like building a woman in the second one. I mean, obviously the entire concept of this movie is far fetched, all three of them, but that especially just because Dan was willing to go along with it felt just super like what. I mean, not to say that I completely understand Howard in this one. I mean, Herbert got his sister killed, and he's like, "Oh, you can bring people back from the dead. I want to help you do this." And then as soon as he sees the results where
Yeah.
the person's crazy because that's what happened, he's like, "Oh, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore."
Yeah, I thought maybe at first they were gonna go with like he is trying to get this job at the prison because he wants revenge on West. Like I thought maybe that might have been a more interesting
Yeah,
angle, but instead he just really quickly falls into that assistant role that we've already seen in the past two movies. Honestly, I would probably say I like this about the same as Bride,
for
but
different reasons.
like exactly, yeah. Like I think there's stuff in each movie that each movie does better or worse than the other
Yeah,
one.
like I say, the effects for all the stuff. At one point in the movie, there's a prisoner who's got missing half his body, and I thought that looked really
Mhm.
because it was like jumping around and attacking and like like it was sort of leaping at things with his arms, and I was
Yeah,
like, in a movie that's clearly very low budget in every other way, I would expect this to look like garbage, but it actually kind of looked impressive. I
yeah,
was like, oh, this looks good. All
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. I was actually surprised. I think really maybe the only detriment is there was a few shoddy CGI stuff here and
Mm.
there, but even that didn't seem like they relied too
No,
heavily
you
on
could
it.
tell that it was still mainly practical. It was just like here or there they had
Yeah.
to like touch it up with some CG for whatever. Like I'm sure the guy at the
Mhm.
start missing his jaw. I have no doubt there was probably some CG involved with that just to like make it look like there was less
Oh, sure.
space or more space than there
Yeah.
actually was or whatever. But no, so it's that. But obviously the problems are the
Mm.
characters are definitely one dimensional and acting is pretty ropey from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Obviously Combs is great though. Combs is just back to being himself. Like this.
Yeah, I think I mentioned like in the last one too, like no matter how like you could turn out like the shittiest Re-Animator movie, as long as you still have Combs doing West, like there's always going to be at least that little bit of bright spot, in it. Like every time, you see him in it, it's still like, you just get like this nice feeling of you like, oh man, I love seeing this
It
character and
and it
this
helps that it's got a
performance from
great
this
main
actor.
theme. Like I was saying earlier, when he first gets the syringe and it kicks, it's like dun dun dun
Oh yeah.
dun 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 dun. Like
And
that main theme's like so iconic. Well, I mean, iconic's maybe not the right word because I feel like it's not iconic because like most average Joe won't know what it is, but for people who like Re-Animator and like horror movies, it's such a memorable main
Oh
theme.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I was a little bummed because yeah, it doesn't play during the title sequence.
Yeah, you
In
hear
the
the
beginning.
start of it, like it starts with the same bit and then it goes into a new theme. Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, they kind of make up for
yeah.
it later.
But no, I like that use. It builds him up as this legend, like it's he's got his tools back, so shit's about to go down. And
Yeah.
it does feel wacky and ridiculous, like it should. There's some over the top sequences.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the new twist that they add into the reanimating things, which we'll get to in spoilers.
Mhm.
So here's one thing as well that we pointed out a lot in the first two movies, and I feel like especially here probably more than ever, is that it's weird that that West is never like villainized at all in this movie.
Oh,
Like,
sure, yeah.
and he's never like a good hero character either. He is like so neutral.
Mm.
Like on D&D alignment, he is chaotic neutral.
Mm.
That's what he is.
Yeah. Well, you know what I find interesting for a horror movie is, most of the time when you're dealing with a franchise, it's built around a monster, but in this case, it's built around a man that makes the monsters. But he's also like usually ends
Yeah.
up fighting the
But
monsters
he's not a hero,
too.
not by a
So-
long shot. Yeah.
No, they're not,
Because
yeah.
he clearly doesn't care about human life. He constantly makes up excuses about wanting to do his extreme experiments. But the villain is definitely
Yeah.
the warden, the sleazy warden who,
Oh, yeah.
like he is definitely the bad guy in this. Just like in the first movie, it was Dr. Hill, but it puts us in this really weird place. Which I mean, I appreciate it in the sense that it's unique. Like it's like, well, okay, well, I mean,
Yeah.
I can't think of any other movies that get away with this, so why not?
Yeah, no, I think yeah, it's definitely like unique among horror franchises, and it's
Yeah.
cool.
I think where it maybe falters a little bit though was in the third act where because there's no one that I'm truly rooting for because I care about them surviving, I'm not like as invested in what's going on.
Yeah, and it's also like again, like a prison is such a big ecosystem, uh, and then I feel like once the in the third act and when things start going off the rails and we're kind of seeing lots of different little scenes with different characters and stuff, but I feel like we haven't had a ton of build up. Like we have little scenes with characters here and there, but I feel like we don't really know them a
Nah,
ton.
there's like the one prisoner
And
we
then,
get to
like-
know a lot, and then there's like two sort of minor ones. Um,
Yeah.
Honestly, my favorite prisoner is the guy who's addicted to drugs, and it's not just that he's addicted to a
Yeah.
specific drug. He just wants anything. Like, yeah, he
Any
comes
drugs,
to the doctor's office just asking for hey, last time I felt this way, they give me some of
Yeah.
this. You got any of that? Can I have some of that? And then later
Yeah.
on, he's just eating pills like candy. He's just going. And then of course he finds the Re-Animator serum, and he's like, oh, that's just really good stuff.
Yeah, the pay like I thought that was like a little cheesy at first, but then the payoff with
Yeah, the
it's pretty
payoff to
great.
it's quite good. So, but yeah, so I'll give the spoiler warning. Full spoilers from this point on for Beyond Re-Animator. So yeah, like I said, the addict guy, when he finds the green serum, he actually injects it to him, and it was actually interesting because I was like, yeah, what does this do to a person who's already alive? Like, what does it do to someone who's living? And
And I don't know if we mentioned it before, but I think one of the original ideas in the like first movie that they ended up scrapping was that I think they were gonna say that West was slightly addicted to the serum and he was giving himself like little tiny
Okay.
doses. But so I forget where I heard that, but I think that was like an idea early on that they ended up scrapping.
yeah, and clearly that doesn't count anymore because this guy ends up popping
Yeah.
his own eyeballs out with the serum. So, but it was an interesting thing
Yeah.
because I was like, oh yeah, we've never really asked this question before in the series. Like, what happens to a living person who takes this? Joe, I
Yeah.
thought was interesting about this one is because they kind of play with the idea that what if this is the one where it works? Like it actually perfects it and someone comes back. And I thought they were going that route with Laura, who of course ends up dying about halfway through, and they bring her back. And it was funny because I was surprised she died, and I went, wait a minute, of course she's dying because we need people to die to bring them back. That's what Re-Animator is. Duh.
Yeah.
But and it kind of works to a point, but it's obviously not without its kinks. Like she has moments where she gets to talk to them when she's back, which is different and new. Well, I mean, obviously Hell talked in the first one, but talked in the sense where she felt like herself for a while before bad stuff
Yeah.
started kicking in and whatnot.
She's not like a raving
Yeah.
lunatic.
And then the idea, of course, that he's
So
mixing DNA between different animals because it might help with the stabilization once they come back. So we get the warden becomes
yeah,
like half rat.
yeah, like I forget exactly what the scientific reasoning for this was, but kind of the wrinkle they add to the reanimation process now is that he thinks basically like if you inject, what is it, basically just
I
DNA
think it was
or something
specifically
from these
plasma.
other people?
Plasma is a
Yeah,
neutral energy, and as long as it doesn't matter what species it's from. I mean, I'm sure it's all bullshit what he said, but that was
yeah.
the gist of it.
So you get, yeah, so you get the some rat DNA into the warden, which what did I thought did a pretty good job at being like rat
Yeah,
like.
it was
Just
basically
the
just the front two teeth were a bit bigger, and he
Yeah,
was still kind of acting like himself. Because the warden's whole thing is that he's this awful character that the prisoners are all scared
mm,
of. Because the first guy who gets reanimated and he obviously goes mad and he's raving lunatic, he calms down whenever the warden's in the room because he's scared of the warden. Like he
mm,
remembers the fear of the warden,
yeah.
and that's an interesting idea. Um,
Now, and I like the idea once like he discovers like the reanimation stuff. Like, in the first movie, you basically have Dr. Hill who just wants it because he's a scientist and he wants to claim the discovery or whatever. I like the idea that this warden is so obsessed with punishing the wicked that he actually thinks like death is too quick and easy a punishment for them. So he likes the idea of being able to bring them back and constantly torturing them. Like that I think is like a great idea. But yeah, it's kind of glossed over like pretty quickly.
it's great. Tim wants this implemented in prisons everywhere.
Well, not a real life idea. I don't. I mean, it's an idea for this evil character.
Yeah,
to
and he
wanna
is
do
evil
that.
because he's the one who kills Laura because like
Yeah,
she comes back and she wants to tour. She's trying to like figure out more stuff about West. She wants to meet the guy who's been reanimated, and when he catches her, he tries to blackmail her into a sexual
Blackmail.
blackmail. He tries to sexually assault her.
He uses technology to
Yeah,
ironically
he tries to
change
sexually
like
assault her via blackmail, and she tries to fight back, and then he hits her with a cane and stuff, and death then comes, and
yeah. Don't worry, his penis does get bitten off
it
later in
does
the movie.
later on when she's like like reanimated, and this is the thing, they put part of his DNA in her, so sometimes you hear a bit of his voice coming through her, and sometimes she'll go a little bit
Yeah,
evil, but
yeah.
she actually intentionally goes to give him a blowjob later on and bites off his dick. I will say I thought the bitten off dick looked a bit on the cheap fake side.
Yeah, which is weird because it's like, aren't there like super realistic like looking dildos? Like, couldn't you just
Yeah.
buy
Well, that was the
one of
thing. It just looked
those?
like a dildo where they put some like blood at the cut base of it,
Yeah,
if you will. And I'm like, this looks really fake, guys. And it's funny that the rat's coming to get it, but
but
it's still.
yeah, and of course it's part of, as we've seen before, like reanimated body parts can kind of act independently of their own. So you get like some. I actually would have liked more of like the adventures of Rat and Penis. Like that could have been a fun little like spin-off or something.
Um. So
Oh, don't act like you didn't
so
want
of
to see
course
that.
Howard wants to bring her back, and Herbert's oh yeah she's fresh, let's do it, and they do it, and she is fine a little bit at first, then she's freaking out, and eventually by the end of the movie like she's aware of what she is and she wants to die. She's like begging Howard to kill her. So we get this scene at the end where when the cops finally come in because there's a prison riot, of course. When everything goes down, there's a big riot at the end. He's just like sitting there holding her decapitated head, uh, which obviously is really over the top. So this is the great thing about the movie is that Herbert West gets out of the prison at the end and walks off into the night. He's free, clearly leaving it open for a sequel if they want to do one at some point.
Yeah. Well, that's how I felt at the end of this. Is like I like this, but it doesn't feel like this should be the like farewell song. Like I feel like I just need one more like Herbert West, Jeffrey Combs Re-Animator movie. Like it and especially now I feel like, man, the time's right. Like gotta do it before he's like too old. Like let's just get one last one in there.
I feel like the mad scientist role is one that lends itself to being an older actor though. Like I feel like if anything he'll grow into it even more if he's in his 60s.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which I don't think he's quite that old yet, but well, maybe he is.
No, I mean
let's check his age. What's Jeffrey Combs' age? 54 he was born. So he he is in the 60s. He's 60,
60s, yeah.
64, give or take. Yeah.
Yeah, so like he looked a little older in this movie, but not too much. And yeah, I bet he could, yeah, definitely still, lead
Yeah,
the movie or
he'd
something.
have
But
been 49 in this one.
yeah, so yeah, man, I just like to see like one last, the movie with him. But yeah, it is like a great ending though. Yeah, him basically taking yeah, Howard's credentials and getting out of there
How
scot
about an
free.
animated series called Re-Animated?
Oh, I would definitely watch that. I'm always down for more animated horror. I feel like we don't have enough cartoon horror. I think that would be
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, you got your villain. He gets his comeuppance. But all the good characters end up being miserable as well. Basically, anyone who ever like
Yeah,
gets involved with Herbert West, everything just goes to shit for them. The entire prison's having a riot.
yeah,
The guy who loves his rat and calls him Ratty, and is going to
Ratty.
kill West because he thinks that he's done something to his rat,
He did
but he
something.
reanimates the rat fairly successfully, although it's a rat, so I mean you can't tell it's a bit more vicious, and because he has this whole like showdown in the prison yard, but he just hands him his rat back, and
Yeah,
he's like, "Ratty, give Daddy a kiss," and then that's just the end of
yeah.
it.
Ugh, ugh. You know me. I hate rats, and I was like disgusted by this. Ugh,
Um,
Jesus. But I mean, this was like the stuff I wanted to see more of because again, like prisons are such like a like unique and even without adding reanimated dead bodies, it's still like a horrific and
yeah,
scary environment. So like I wanted to see more of this stuff of like most people like are associated with gangs or something in prison, but like Herbert West seems like he's kind of like just like this lone agent in there. So it'd be interesting to see him running afoul of like this group or something, and then how would he deal with getting out of that? Like that was stuff I
yeah. I
kind
mean,
of
the
wish we
ratty
got a
guy
little
was the one
more
we
of.
knew the most. The guy who got reanimated, of course, is sort of around, the first guy, and then you've got the pill guy, and then there's a couple of other like randomers we see here or there that eventually die. The warden
Yeah,
like beats them to death
yeah,
once he's been ratified before the end of the movie.
yeah.
Uh, and then there's chaos that's going on and so on. Like I do think the third act's a little bit messy, and that there's just so much going on that there's not
Mhm.
like a good through line. I think during the last half hour,
Yeah,
but I mean that's not like a super big
okay,
complaint in the grand scheme of things.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, ultimately, like it's enjoyable, but I feel like maybe there's some missed opportunities. They definitely could have done more with it.
Yeah, so some better characters. Um, yeah, just a tighter script. But that said, I like the script for this one more than I like the script for the last one. I think
I,
you
I
know
yeah, I think I would agree with that. Like the second one, I don't mind, but I mean, yeah, like you said, it's really just going over the same beats and stuff. And this is again going through the same beats, but at least it feels different because it has like a different setting
it's
and
a different setting, but
that
it
kind of
actually
thing.
feels like it's going over the same beats, at least in a sort of more faithful, like, oh, that's the point of this
Oh,
one's meant
sure.
to be a homage to the original, whereas the second one it feels like
Mhm.
we're doing the Bride of Frankenstein because it's the obvious thing to do, but they're kind of doing it, but just shoehorn it into the same formula. I don't know, that was a bit
Mhm.
messier, whereas this one it feels like a paler imitation of the first one, but it feels like a
Mhm.
solid enough like attempt of like making a sequel to it and being like, hey, you like this thing 20 years ago? Here's an
Yeah.
updated version of it. Um, but yeah,
Mhm.
so it's funny that it took me so long to watch the sequels to this. I mean, even the first one I didn't see
Mhm.
until probably my late teens. You know,
I,
but
yeah, I think it's a um like overall the series I like a lot, but it definitely does feel like it goes a little bit under the radar when you're talking about like franchises and stuff. Like it's maybe a little bit more for the horror
yeah,
connoisseur.
I feel like it's one where it's definitely a franchise where you think, oh, the first one's like a really good movie, and then the sequels exist, and
Mhm.
they're not bad sequels, they're not the worst sequels ever, but it's
No,
not like in like
yeah,
Friday the 13th status where it's like, oh, there's all these sequels and there's a bunch of them that are better
mhm.
than the first one, or even like even Halloween
Yeah,
obviously is easily the best of the Halloween franchise, and it's like you don't need it any more than the
yeah,
first Halloween, but there are sequels that are good that people like a lot. Uh, and and
I
these
mean,
sequels aren't even that bad. It's not even like if you compare it to like I don't know, Children of the Corn, or
like
compare it to anything that had
the
just really shit sequels that are not worth watching.
to me it feels maybe somewhat like Phantasm-ish, where you have a really good first movie, and then uh, I think the Phantasm 2 I like more than Bride 2, Bride of Re-Animator, but it does kind of remind me of that, where it's a smaller franchise, and it has sequels that maybe don't live up to the first one, but they're still watchable. Like, I don't think it's never like that
I
bad.
think Phantasm 2 and 3 are a lot better than Re-Animator 2 and 3.
I don't know if I'd say they're better. I don't know if I'd say
Two
a lot
especially, I think,
better.
is a lot better. Um,
Two is a lot better, but I think once you're starting to get into like Phantasm, like 3 and 4, I think those are about like the same quality level, at least to me.
yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to compare Phantasm 5 to any of these Re-Animator movies, because once Re-Animator gets a
Yeah,
fourth movie, we can compare it to Phantasm 4 and see how it shapes up. But it's
there you
definitely a
go.
franchise to me where most people will see the first one, and then only
Yeah.
the hardcore horror people will check out 2 and 3.
Mhm.
And they're not bad movies
Mhm.
to check out. They're kind of fun little sequels, but ultimately
Oh, yeah,
they're kind of
definitely.
forgettable compared to the first one.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, they're ones one of the reasons why I wanted to do these movies, or we both wanted to do them, not just because of Octoberthon, and we like to kind of bang out a smaller
hmm.
franchise during it, but I just bought all of these on Blu-ray, and because especially Beyond, I think, was just released on Blu-ray for the first time, and I think it's a nice little collection, and these are definitely ones that I'll be watching again at some point. Not right away, but it's a you can easily marathon them, or throw on every
Yeah,
now and again. Like, especially like with the like stuff like with the second one. I feel like, especially like you can put it on while maybe you're doing something else, and then have to pay too close attention. But then once it does get into like the crazy final act, like there's some fun stuff to kind of grab you with, and same thing with this. You can kind of pop in and out and watch some fun scenes.
don't pay attention the whole time is the best experience with this movie. My recommendation.
If it's a I'm saying, if it's a rewatch, obviously the first time you want to pay close attention, but then it's a fun movie you can put on from time to
Okay,
time, and
okay.
you know,
I mean, it's definitely a
same.
franchise where obviously it's a very dark humor as opposed to straight up horror, but
Yeah.
and that's something that's true throughout the whole thing. I mean, it never loses its tone. I'll give it that. It keeps its tone
Yep.
consistent throughout, so
Mhm.
that's good. So yeah, this was the shorter franchise we did all three movies of in this October-thon. I actually
Mhm.
this kind of changed last minute. There was another short franchise I wanted to do, which I will definitely be doing next year. There's a trilogy. Well, technically there's more than three of them now, but still, it's happening next October-thon. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's coming.
I don't even know if I remember what this was.
I'll tell you afterwards, Tim. You'll be fine. You'll know.
Okay. Now, it was actually just funny that I earlier in the week I'd happened to be listening to some podcasts at work, and started listening to this podcast called Shockwaves, which is like a horror movie review and interview show. And so I was catching up on old episodes. I just happened to listen to one with Brian Yuzna, which I thought was pretty
Hmm.
interesting. Um, so I got some good tidbits. So one of the most interesting things I thought of, and I don't know if you already knew this or saw it somewhere else, but did you know originally who they were looking to cast as West, kind of before, like they nailed down Combs?
I don't know.
And this is, I think it definitely wouldn't have been the same as Combs. Like, Combs is just so perfect. But when they mentioned this, I, kind of started thinking about it. I was like, okay, like I can see him delivering these lines. But Miguel Ferreira was actually like in lines to
Okay.
be Herbert West. Like, it definitely would have been different, but like, I feel like he kind of has that same kind of like acidic,
Oh yeah, that I
kind
know,
of
but I'm smarter than
delivery.
you. Yeah, he's got that
Yeah.
tone. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, it's hard to not imagine Combs, but thinking about, Miguel Ferreira, R.I.P. Miss him, but great actor. But I was thinking about, I was like, okay, like I could see him doing that. That'd be
Yeah,
interesting.
no, I mean, like I can see it. That's interesting. But we should rate the movie, Tim. We should rate Beyond
Okay.
Re-Animator out of 10. So what are you giving it?
Uh, And again, I can't go super high, but I think I'm gonna give it a. Let's go 5.5. I yeah, there was a lot I like, but there's just kind of like some cheapness and some problems, and and at this point, the third movie, and we're kind of still going over the same beats. It's a little unfortunate, but there was a lot to like about it. Yeah, I wish it was a little better, but yeah, that's what I go with.
Yeah, I mean, I gave the last one a 5.5. This one,
Mhm.
I like it a little bit more, so I think by default I'm going with a 6, just by logic,
Yeah,
uh, dictating that.
I think we kind of flip
Yeah,
flopped on like, yeah, I feel like I was like that with Bride, and yeah, you're like that
yeah.
with this.
So, yeah, I guess
So,
in terms of
I mean,
quality between the two of them, they're relatively close, just for different reasons. But
yeah, exactly. And then since it is the end, I mean, it's only three movies. I guess people can probably kind of predict what we would do, but should we rank the
well, I
the
mean, I said I
series?
like Beyond a little bit better. You seem to like Braid a little bit better. So clearly, we're both going to say Reanimator number one,
Yeah,
and then I'll say
yeah.
Beyond, then
And
Braid. You'll
then
say Braid, then Beyond.
yeah, I guess, but it's like, I mean, honestly, it's like Reanimator number one, no doubt. And then I feel like two and three, like if I could do it, if you're doing a ranking and you could tie like movies, there would probably be a tie for me. If absolutely can't do that, then I guess two and three. But it's hard depending on my mood in the day, though. Like they can kind of easily flip
Yeah,
flop.
yeah. Before lunch, Braid. After lunch, Beyond. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. If I'm kind of full, maybe if I'm sleepy, it could affect it.
but yeah, so that is Beyond Reanimator. That is us wrapping up the Reanimator trilogy. And who knows, maybe
Mhm.
we'll get another one someday. But that is it for now. So,
Mhm. Maybe we'll have to review the Ash versus Reanimator comic book series at some point.
um, Reanimator, Reanimated. I don't know. I'm thinking of names for this fourth movie that comes like another 15 years later. Uh, but no, that is the episode. So let us know what you think of the Reanimator franchise and Beyond Reanimator specifically in the comments. If you want to support the show, this is Octoberthon, and of course there was a bunch of votes for this month for the Patreon picks. But every month you do get to vote on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for one of the movies we do if you're a patron. So if you want to support us, head over there, have a look at what's on offer, and just get a warm fuzzy. You can just support us for $1 though. You don't get as much, of course, but even that is fantastic. And if you can't do that, don't feel too bad. Watch the ads on YouTube, let them play, turn your ad block off, like, subscribe, rate us on iTunes, all the usual things. All that stuff does help and support us, and we appreciate it loads. But that is us, guys. On Twitter at Screams Midnight. In fact, hold on a second here. Hold on a sec. I've forgotten I'd
No.
set this up, Timmy. Hold on. Hold
Oh,
on.
okay. Uh,
There we go. I'm just going to have them fade into the screen, which is, not even useful for people listening to the audio version, but for the video folk, there's some handy information at the bottom of the screen. So look at that, fancy.
wow. Like a Mr. Colin Trevorrow over here.
Why Colin Trevor?
That's the first director I could think of.
That's so weird, Tim. That's such a weird one to go to first.
Oh, like you could name another director?
Quentin Tarantino,
Nah, never
Steven
seen his work.
Spielberg, Christopher Nolan, Alfred Hitchcock, Akira Kurosawa.
You're just naming patrons.
Oh yeah, sure. Alfred Hitchcock's one of our patrons. Yeah, sure, sure. From beyond the grave.
The estate of Alfred Hitchcock is a big supporter.
Mm.
Even though we've done like what, one of his movies? Have we done any of his movies? I don't know.
I mean, a lot of these movies wouldn't be on Screams because as much as they veer into horror territory occasionally, I think Psycho's the only one, and the Birds, Psycho and the Birds are the only two that I'd say were Screams After Midnight material.
Yes. Psycho versus Birds. Great movie.
I'd watch it.
He just Norman Bates just like looks at a little hole through the wall. He just sees a bunch of birds.
No, it's just that scene from
flapping in the
Birdemic.
shower.
He's got a coat hanger and he's trying to hit the birds.
Oh. That'd be great. I definitely want to see this movie now.
But that is us, folks. Thank you very much for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we'll see you next